That fifth cement truck shattered the main support beam of my great-grandfather's century-old bridge. And there she was, Deborah Kensington Price, our HOA president, standing at her kitchen window with a steaming mug of coffee, smiling like she'd just won. She thought she had me beat. Send truck after truck across my family's hand-built oak bridge until it collapsed. Then sweep in with her emergency demolition. Order, forcing me to sell the creekfront land my family had protected for 4 generations. But what this corporate lawyer turned suburban tyrant didn't know was that I'm a retired Army Corps engineer, and I was about to turn her corruption into the trap that would end her reign for good. The diesel fumes choked the morning air. My grandmother's china rattled in the cabinet like an earthquake. But as I watched those cracks spread through the oak beams my great-grandfather cut with his own hands, I wasn't trembling with anger anymore. I was calculating, what would you do if your HOA tried to steal your family's land? And where are you watching from? Let me know if HOAs are this corrupt in your area too. Let me back up and tell you how this whole nightmare began. My name is Marcus Thornfield, and 3 months ago, I was just a 52-year-old retired engineering contractor living peacefully on the 40-acre homestead my great-grandfather built back in the 1920s. The property sits along Willow Creek, once quiet countryside, until the Willowbrook subdivision sprouted up around us like weeds in a perfect lawn. The pride of our land has always been that bridge, hand-hewn from local oak by my great-grandfather himself. It spans Willow Creek and connects our home to the main road. 4 generations of Thornfields have crossed it to come home. My grandfather proposed to my grandmother on that bridge. My father taught me to fish from its railings. I carried my wife across it on our wedding day, and years later, my newborn daughter the same way. The wood still smells faintly of linseed oil, the same kind my great-grandfather used to preserve it. If you run your fingers along the railing, you can still feel every mark left by his handplane. On quiet mornings and before the invasion, the creek babbled beneath it, and honeysuckle grew wild along the banks. Then Deborah Kensington Price slithered into the neighborhood. At 48, she was what happens when corporate law meets suburban dictatorship. Perfectly styled blonde hair that defied gravity, designer suits for grocery runs, and that leather portfolio she carried like it held nuclear launch codes. She'd made her fortune helping developers bulldoze family farms for shopping plazas. Now she had her sights set on our quiet street. 6 months after moving in, she'd maneuvered her way into becoming HOA president. Her first decree? My century-old bridge was a substandard infrastructure hazard threatening property values, because apparently, real craftsmanship doesn't fit her vision for luxury development. I'll never forget our first confrontation. She appeared at my door in a crisp white blazer, legal papers in hand and a smile cold enough to freeze fire. "Mr. Thornfield, I'm here to help modernize your property," she said. "My property was standing when this was still cow pasture," I replied. Her smile tightened. "Progress waits for no one. Replace it with our approved concrete structure or face $500 daily fines." Here's what I didn't tell her. 20 years in the Army Corps of Engineers teaches you that every structure has weak points. Every opponent has vulnerabilities, and every problem has a solution if you collect the right data. When I refused her ultimatum, the cement truck parade began. Suddenly, every construction project in the subdivision needed to route their heavy trucks directly over my bridge. "Sorry, pal," the drivers would shrug. "HOA-approved route. These weren't delivery trucks. They were 30-ton monsters, and every pass made my bridge groan in protest. Each run left new fractures spreading through the old oak like spider webs. The morning air that once smelled of honeysuckle was now thick with diesel and concrete dust. 3 weeks into the assault, Deborah's brother-in-law, conveniently, the city building inspector, arrived for an emergency evaluation. And wouldn't you know it, he found the bridge critically unsafe. "Sorry, Mr. Thornfield," he said, sounding like a used car salesman. "Immediate danger to public safety. You've got 30 days to demolish it, or we'll handle it and send you the bill." That night I sat on the bridge as my grandfather clock struck midnight. The honeysuckle still smelled sweet, but diesel fumes hung beneath it like a threat. As I ran my hand along the weathered railing, something clicked in my mind. This wasn't about a bridge anymore. This was war, and Deborah had just made her first tactical mistake. She gave me a timeline. In the Army, we had a saying, "Time is the ammunition of planning." And now it was time to load up. 2 weeks into Deborah's cement truck campaign, my daughter Sarah announced her engagement. She wanted the reception in our backyard, the same spot where her grandparents had celebrated their golden anniversary. The date was set for the first Saturday in June. 60 guests. A catered dinner overlooking Willow Creek. It should have been perfect. The morning of the wedding dawned clear. Blue skies, a soft breeze, and the scent of my wife's roses in bloom. Sarah looked radiant in her grandmother's lace dress as guests arrived around 4. The photographer was capturing family moments when I heard it. The low rumble of diesel engines in the distance. Please tell me that's not what I think it is, I muttered. But it was. A massive cement mixer barreled down the road toward the bridge. Then another. 6 trucks in total, each arriving just in time to ruin the ceremony. It was like a military convoy crashing a wedding. Dad, what's happening? Sarah grabbed my arm as the first truck hit the bridge. The sound was like a freight train passing 6 feet away. Aunt Martha dropped her champagne flute in shock. Uncle Robert's war medals rattled like wind chimes. The bridge swayed so hard that my 93-pound great-aunt Helen had to cling to the railing to keep from falling. My 86-year-old mother froze halfway across, gripping her walker white-knuckled in fear. Everyone back to the house, I shouted over the roar. The photographer caught everything. The panic, the fear in my mother's eyes, the wedding collapsing into chaos. And as the last truck rumbled away, I looked toward Deborah's window. She was standing there, coffee mug raised, like she was toasting her victory. That's when I made my first breakthrough. While helping guests to their cars, I overheard 2 truck drivers talking. 6 runs in one day, that's some serious overtime, one said. Yeah, the other replied. Kensington Construction pays double for weekend emergency jobs. Kensington Construction. Everything clicked into place. A quick online search that night confirmed it. Deborah owned 40% of that very company. The following Monday, I received a certified letter, a quote for an emergency replacement bridge, $80,000 for a plain concrete structure that meets HOA standards. Meanwhile, the State Historical Society's appraisal valued my original bridge at $150,000 in historical worth and excellent condition for its age. So she damaged my bridge with her own trucks, then planned to profit from replacing it. It was like someone slashing your tires, then offering to sell you new ones at triple the price. But I remembered something from my engineering days. Documentation beats accusation every time. I started building my case the same way. I'd plan a bridge, methodically, step by step, with backup calculations for every assumption. First, I filed an emergency restraining order to stop all truck traffic immediately. My attorney, Jim Patterson, whose grandmother once taught mine how to can peaches, presented a detailed timeline showing that the bridge had been perfectly stable before Deborah's truck parade began. The photos spoke for themselves. The stress fractures followed a precise pattern, one that any structural engineer could recognize as deliberate overloading. By Wednesday, the restraining order was granted. No more trucks allowed across my bridge until a full inspection could be completed by an independent expert. Thursday morning, I hired Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a civil engineering professor from State University, with 40 years of bridge analysis under her belt. She arrived Friday with more sensors, tripods, and high-speed cameras than a NASA launch team. Her preliminary report was pure vindication. This structure shows signs of recent overload stress, but its original construction remains remarkably sound. Whoever built this bridge designed it to last centuries and not decades. For the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful. The truck harassment had stopped. I had professional documentation on my side. The legal system for once seemed to be working as it should. Then Sunday evening, my neighbor Jake Morrison knocked on my door with a printout that sent my blood pressure through the roof. "Marcus," he said, "you need to see what she's posting online." The Facebook post was classic Deborah, corporate wordplay wrapped around character assassination, concerned neighbors. "We must address the dangerous situation at 1847 Creek Road. Mr. Thornfield's outdated bridge has been deemed unsafe by qualified inspectors. His refusal to modernize this hazardous structure puts our entire community at risk. How many children must be hurt before he accepts responsibility?" 37 comments and 49 shares in 6 hours. Half the neighborhood now believed I was some sort of public menace. Round one to Deborah. But the battle was far from over. Monday morning brought more bad news, wrapped in official letterhead. Somehow Deborah had managed to get my restraining order overturned. By another judge, Judge Bradley Hoffman, a man who, rumor had it, spent more time golfing with our HOA president than in his courtroom. The new order was short and devastating. Plaintiff has failed to demonstrate irreparable harm. Defendant HOA retains authority over approved traffic routes through subdivision common areas. Common areas? My bridge wasn't a common area. It was private property, built decades before their subdivision even existed. But try explaining that to a judge whose mind was already made up over cocktails and campaign donations. By Tuesday afternoon, the cement trucks were back, and this time they came in waves. Every 30 minutes from dawn to dusk, the road shook with another 30-ton visitor. The constant rumbling made my coffee cups dance across the counter. My wife, Linda, started wearing noise-canceling headphones just to read her morning paper without getting a headache. The psychological warfare was working. Neighbors who used to wave now crossed the street to avoid eye contact. Rumors spread that I was anti-development, selfishly hurting property values. Anonymous complaints started piling up. Unlicensed bridge operation, public safety hazard, noise violations. Every accusation was designed to isolate and exhaust me. Then Wednesday, the biggest monster yet arrived, a concrete pumper so massive it made the entire bridge sag 6 inches under its weight. The old oak groaned like it was crying. I stood there filming the whole nightmare. The driver leaned out his window and shouted, "Sorry about this, Pops, just following orders from the office." "Whose office?" I yelled back over the roar. He shrugged. "Lady pays the bills, lady calls the shots. That's all I know." That night I couldn't sleep. The bridge was showing real battle damage now. 3 support beams had visible fractures running like lightning through the grain. The handrail my great-grandfather had carved himself was splitting down the middle. Every truck that crossed was erasing a century of family craftsmanship, one calculated hit at a time. But insomnia has a strange way of breeding inspiration. Lying awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling and listening to the distant hum of highway traffic, I remembered something from my Army Corps days. When facing superior firepower, you don't attack the enemy's strength. You find their weakness and exploit it. Back in Bosnia, we'd learned that the newest fortifications often hid the oldest vulnerabilities, and Deborah was making one critical mistake, assuming that newer automatically meant stronger, legally and structurally. Thursday morning, I drove to the county courthouse and requested the original property survey records. The clerk, Mrs. Henderson, had known my grandfather from his farming days and was happy to help dig through the archives. "These old records tell such stories," she said, pulling out a leather-bound ledger that smelled of paper, dust, and decades of bureaucracy. "Your great-grandfather was quite the forward-thinking man. The original 1923 survey took me nearly an hour to decode, but when I did, it hit me like a freight train. My great-grandfather had written specific legal language guaranteeing perpetual right of passage for family and invited guests across Willow Creek via existing timber span structure. Even more important, the bridge predated the HOA's easement by 60 years. And from my time dealing with military housing disputes overseas, I knew one crucial principle. Prior existing structures hold grandfather rights, and those can't be overruled by later zoning laws or HOA covenants. It's like constitutional law for property. First rights trump everything that comes, after the rest of Thursday vanished in the county law library. By evening, I'd discovered that the HOA's so-called authority over common areas had about as much legal standing on my bridge as a snowball's chance in July. Their entire case was built on sand. Friday morning, I contacted Elizabeth Morrison, a local historian who specialized in documenting century-old structures. She arrived Saturday with professional gear and the kind of enthusiasm only true preservationists have. "This joinery work is incredible," she said, running her hands over the mortise and tenon joints. "Museum-quality craftsmanship. These chisel marks, your great-grandfather was a real artisan." Her preliminary assessment confirmed what I'd hoped. The bridge qualified for historic designation under state preservation laws. Once that paperwork went through, any demolition would require environmental impact studies, public hearings, and enough bureaucracy to make a senator faint. By Sunday afternoon, it was time for my counterattack. I called an emergency meeting with the HOA board, not with Deborah, but the 4 other members who'd been bulldozed by her overbearing leadership. We met at Jake Morrison's house, where his wife's apple pie made the air smell far friendlier than our usual battlegrounds. "Folks," I began, spreading out copies of the 1923 survey like military maps, "we need to talk about property law and historical preservation. Because what Deborah's been telling you about HOA authority isn't just wrong. It could put this entire board in serious legal jeopardy." Board member Patricia Walsh went pale when she saw the survey's date. "Marcus, are you saying we've been operating outside our legal authority?" "I'm saying you've been played," I replied. "And it's time to level the field." By Monday morning, 3 of the 5 board members had quietly distanced themselves from Deborah's crusade. But instead of backing down, she doubled down, like a Vegas gambler with a maxed-out credit card and a losing streak. The emergency HOA meeting she called for Tuesday night was standing room only. Deborah had spent the weekend rallying her followers, filling the community center with anxious homeowners convinced they were living next to a ticking time bomb. She'd even printed glossy flyers featuring dramatic images of collapsing bridges, none of which even remotely resembled mine. But fear doesn't need accuracy when panic is profitable. "Ladies and gentlemen," Deborah began from behind the podium, her tone somewhere between a CEO and a senator, "we face a situation that threatens the safety and property values of our entire community. Mr. Thornfield's refusal to modernize his dangerous crossing has forced us to take decisive legal action." Her PowerPoint presentation was corporate manipulation at its finest. Slide after slide of doctored numbers, vague citations, and exaggerated risks. Then she dropped her bombshell. "Our investigation confirms that Mr. Thornfield's property operates as a commercial site, since delivery trucks and service vehicles routinely cross his bridge. Therefore, the HOA is entitled to retroactive fees totaling $50,000 in unpaid commercial assessments, plus late penalties and interest, bringing the total to nearly $75,000. Furthermore, under HOA lien provisions, we are legally empowered to force the sale of non-compliant properties to recover community debts." The crowd murmured an uneasy agreement, fear and rumor spreading faster than reason. I sat in the back row, feeling like Daniel staring down a den full of lions. The smell of burnt coffee from the community center's old percolator, mixed with the tension of mob mentality settling in. When they opened the floor for public comment, I rose slowly. "I'd like to address the board," I said. Deborah's smile could have cut glass. "Surely you understand this is a legal matter now, Mr. Thornfield. Perhaps you should speak through your attorney." "Oh, I plan to," I said evenly. "But first, I'd like to share something fascinating I found this week." I walked to the front and connected my laptop to their projector. The screen flickered, revealing the 1923 property survey, enlarged so every person in that packed room could see the faded ink. "This," I began, "is the original survey for my property, filed 60 years before this HOA even existed. Take a close look at the section marked Perpetual Right of Passage via Existing Timber Span. Structure." Deborah's confident smile wavered like a candle in the wind. "Ancient paperwork doesn't override modern safety codes," she snapped. "You're absolutely right," I replied calmly. "But it does override HOA authority. My bridge predates your covenants by 6 decades. And under property law, that's called grandfather rights. Existing structures legally protected from future regulations." The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the nervous shuffle of papers. I clicked to the next slide. Elizabeth Morrison's preliminary historical designation report. The State Historical Society confirmed it. My bridge officially qualified for protection under preservation law. Any attempt at demolition or major alteration would now require environmental impact studies, public hearings, and enough bureaucratic red tape to choke a horse. But my real nuclear option came with the third slide. Architectural plans, blueprints I uncovered through a public records request. Detailed drawings for luxury condominiums, specifically designed for creekfront lots, filed by Kensington Development Company just 6 months before Deborah moved into our neighborhood. These are development plans for high-end condos, I said evenly. And if you look closely at the lot numbers, well, they match my property exactly. Filed by a company that just happens to share our HOA president's maiden name. Funny coincidence, isn't it? The silence that followed was absolute, like the air itself had been sucked out of the room. You could almost hear people's worldviews cracking. Deborah's transformation was instant, from confident prosecutor to deer-in-headlights defendant in under 30 seconds. That's completely irrelevant to legitimate safety concerns, she stammered. Is it? I asked, clicking to the next slide. Because I also found these bank loan documents. Appeared on the screen. Pre-construction financing for the same condo project, listing my property as collateral. Someone's been planning this hostile takeover for 2 years, I said. The cement trucks, the fake safety inspections, the sudden crisis. All of it was theater designed to force the sale of my family's land. The crowd turned like an incoming tide. Faces shifted from anger to realization, from loyal supporters to a jury seeing through the illusion. Patricia Walsh raised her hand from the board table. Deborah, she said sharply, did you disclose these development plans when you joined the board? This is a distraction from real safety issues, Deborah shot back. Did you disclose them? Patricia's voice could have sliced through steel. Before Deborah could spin another lie, Jake Morrison rose from the audience. I move for an emergency vote of no confidence in our current HOA president. Seconded, called Mrs. Patterson from across the room. Within 10 minutes, Deborah Kensington Price was officially out, no longer in charge of anything except explaining to her lawyer how her carefully orchestrated property grab had just detonated like a powder keg in a lightning storm. But as I packed up my laptop, I knew this wasn't the end, just the intermission. Because cornered animals don't surrender. They get desperate. Losing her presidency should have ended Deborah's bridge obsession. Instead, it made her something far more dangerous. A lawyer with nothing left to lose. 3 days after her public humiliation, I was in my workshop sorting through the mountain of legal documents I'd collected when my phone rang. It was Mrs. Henderson from the county courthouse, and she sounded like she'd just unearthed buried treasure. Marcus, you need to get down here immediately, she said. I found something in the old records that changes everything. An hour later, I was standing in the courthouse basement surrounded by filing cabinets that looked like they'd survived 2 world wars and a flood. The air smelled of dust and history. Mrs. Henderson pulled out a manila folder so old its edges crumbled like dry leaves. I was cross-referencing your property records with the original township surveys, she explained, unfolding a hand-drawn map from 1919, delicate as tissue paper. Look closely, she said. The map showed Willow Creek's original course, winding through what's now the entire Willowbrook subdivision. But what caught my eye were the markings, faint red lines outlining water boundaries in meticulous detail. See these dotted lines? Mrs. Henderson traced them with a reverent finger. That's the original riparian boundary for your great-grandfather's property. Back then, owning land along a waterway meant controlling access to that water, for the entire upstream flow. I studied the map, gears turning in my mind like a perfectly tuned machine. You're telling me my family holds water rights to the entire creek system? Not just access, she said, smiling. Usage rights, development rights, even environmental authority. Your great-grandfather didn't just buy land with a pretty creek running through it. He bought control of the water source every home in Willowbrook depends on. The implications hit me like an avalanche. Every house in that subdivision and every so-called waterfront property and existed because of my family's creek. The HOA had been collecting monthly fees for creek maintenance and environmental management for 15 years. But according to this map, they'd been selling rights they never actually owned, and managing resources they had no legal authority to control. Mrs. Henderson, I asked quietly, are you telling me this entire subdivision was built and sold using fraudulent water rights claims? She nodded grimly. Every deed, every property description, every HOA covenant that mentions creek access, all of it is legally invalid. Your family never signed away those rights, and under state law they can't be seized through eminent domain. They're privately held riparian resources, not municipal utilities. That evening I called my lawyer, Jim Patterson, for an emergency consultation. When I spread the 1919 map across his mahogany conference table, His reaction was worth the price of admission. "Marcus," he said, eyes wide, "do you realize what you're holding? A really old piece of paper?" I replied. He leaned forward, almost whispering. "Legal dynamite with a lit fuse. If this survey is valid and properly recorded, you could shut off water access to every property in that subdivision tomorrow morning. Legally speaking, they've all been trespassing on your water rights every time they water their lawns or wash their dishes. The nuclear option was right there, hidden in faded ink and century-old precision. I could demand every homeowner in Willowbrook renegotiate their water usage, pay retroactive fees, or face legal action for unauthorized riparian access. The potential damages could financially devastate the entire neighborhood. But that's not who my family raised me to be. I didn't want to destroy innocent neighbors. I wanted justice for the corrupt, and protection for my family's legacy. What I want, I told Jim, is accountability and protection for what my great-grandfather built. "Can we use this as leverage without becoming the villains in someone else's story?" Jim smiled, the kind of smile a chess master gives when the endgame becomes obvious. "Marcus," he said, "you're not just holding leverage anymore. You own the entire game board." The next morning, I cleared my workshop like a general preparing for the campaign of his life. Maps, legal documents, and engineering reports covered every inch of the workbench. The familiar scent of sawdust and machine oil mixed with the charged air of purpose. By noon, my core team had assembled Jim Patterson with his sharp legal expertise, Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, the structural engineer with 4 decades of experience, Elizabeth Morrison, historian and preservation expert, and Mrs. Henderson, carrying copies of every relevant record dating back to the state's founding. We looked like the world's most unlikely war council. But what we had on our side was something Deborah never expected: the truth, backed by a century of documentation. "All right, folks," I began, spreading the old 1919 water rights map across my workbench. "We're not just saving a bridge anymore. We're exposing a fraud that's been bleeding this community dry for 15 years. Jim leaned forward, adjusting his reading glasses. "The water rights discovery changes everything. But we need to be surgical. Go too hard and we hurt innocent families. Go too soft and Deborah walks away untouched." Dr. Rodriguez tapped her folder. "From an engineering standpoint, your bridge is safer than most modern concrete spans. The truck damage was cosmetic, stress fractures that could be repaired in a weekend. Anyone competent would have known that immediately. Which brings us to the cover-up," Elizabeth added. "The inspector who condemned your bridge, he's not just Deborah's brother-in-law. He also has a consulting contract with Kensington Development. I found the paperwork yesterday." Mrs. Henderson nodded. "And the judge who overturned your restraining order? His campaign received a hefty donation from Kensington Construction last election cycle. The web of corruption was bigger than I'd ever imagined. But strangely, that worked in our favor. In the Army, I'd learned that the larger the conspiracy, the weaker it becomes. Too many people keeping too many secrets, and eventually someone talks. Here's our multi-pronged strategy," I announced, feeling like the tactician I'd been trained to be. "First, legal track. Jim files a quiet title action to clarify the water rights and demands a full HOA audit to expose where those creek maintenance fees really went. I moved to the next section of my improvised command center. Second, public relations. Elizabeth will coordinate with the State Historical Society to attract media attention for historic preservation. We'll time the reveal for maximum impact." Dr. Rodriguez spread out her engineering diagrams. Third, technical track. I'll provide professional testimony proving the bridge's structural integrity and showing that a concrete replacement would actually be less safe due to the soil conditions and flood patterns. Jim leaned forward, catching on. "And the trap?" I nodded. "We let Deborah think she still has control. Document everything she does from here on out. Let her dig her own legal grave while we build an airtight case." It was the satisfaction of a plan coming together. Sometimes the best way to catch a predator is to let them hunt until they expose themselves completely. Over the next hour, we assigned specific roles. Mrs. Patterson, the retired journalist 3 houses down, would handle media contacts. Jake Morrison, our city council member, would coordinate the official government response. And Dr. Sarah River from the university's biology department would document the environmental impact of any development on the protected salamander habitat. "Now," I said, pulling out a legal primer Jim had prepared, There's something everyone here needs to understand. When you're dealing with property disputes, especially HOA overreach, document everything. Research original deeds at the county courthouse. Never assume new regulations automatically override older property rights. The law protects prior claims, but only if you can prove them. Dr. Rodriguez added her engineering perspective. And when someone says a structure is unsafe, demand an independent professional evaluation. Don't let intimidation replace actual engineering. Elizabeth chimed in with the historical angle. Historic properties have protection pathways that bypass local politics entirely. State and federal preservation laws can override HOA authority when properly applied. The preparation phase took 3 intense weeks. I installed hidden trail cameras to monitor for any new sabotage attempts, created duplicate document sets stored in fireproof safes, one at home, one in Jim's office. Rehearsed testimony until I could explain complex legal concepts in plain English any jury could understand. We planned witness coordination for the upcoming town hall where Deborah would make her final stand. The Historical Society promised professional photographers. The local paper committed to full coverage. Channel 7 News said they'd send a crew if we could deliver a story worth airing. The beauty of this plan, Jim said as we wrapped up, is that we're not destroying anyone except those who deserve it. Innocent homeowners get protection, the community gets honest leadership, and your bridge gets the legal protection it deserves. I looked around at our small but determined team, feeling something I hadn't since my military days. The calm confidence that comes from thorough preparation and a righteous cause. Deborah wanted a war, I said. Let's show her. What happens when you pick a fight with people who actually know how to win one? Her response was swift, vicious, and completely predictable. Within 48 hours, she filed 3 separate lawsuits. One claiming I'd slandered her, another alleging the bridge posed an imminent public danger, and a third demanding emergency demolition under public safety authority. She was unraveling fast. And dangerous people often do their worst damage in desperation. Tuesday morning brought proof she'd crossed into outright sabotage. My trail cameras caught it all. Crystal clear. HOA board member Stephen Walsh, Patricia's husband, still loyal to Deborah, creeping around my bridge at 2:30 a.m. with a toolbox. The footage was damning. Stephen loosening support bolts, drilling holes in stress points, methodically weakening the structure to create the emergency Deborah needed for her case. The irony was perfect. They were making the bridge dangerous to prove it was dangerous. I called Jim immediately. We've got them red-handed. Criminal conspiracy, property destruction, fraud. Don't move anything yet, Jim warned. Let's see how deep this goes. By Wednesday, the smear campaign began. Anonymous, posts popped up on neighborhood forums accusing me of being an unstable veteran who'd threatened HOA members. Fake accounts spread lies about my mental health and finances. It was professional character assassination, too polished for Deborah to pull off alone. They even implied my wife was afraid of me. By Thursday, it got personal. Linda came home from the bank looking pale. Marcus, something's wrong. Deborah showed up at work today demanding access to our mortgage files. She said there were irregularities. Linda had worked there 15 years without a blemish on her record. Deborah's interference meant she'd crossed from petty corruption into open harassment. She also said the bank might need to reassess our loan, Linda whispered. That was it. Going after me was one thing. Threatening my wife's career was declaring total war. Then came Friday, the most brazen move yet. I was reviewing bridge repair estimates when I heard the rumble of heavy machinery. Out my kitchen window, I saw a county demolition crew setting up at the bridge. The crew chief carried official-looking paperwork, confusion written all over his face. Sir, we have an emergency demolition order for the unsafe structure on this property, he said, handing me forged documents stamped with county seals. From what authority? I demanded. He pointed to the header. County Safety Division. Says here the structure poses imminent collapse risk and must be removed immediately to prevent injury. The forged documents were disturbingly convincing. Official letterhead, believable signatures, even a fake case number that would probably check out if anyone called the right number. Deborah had poured serious money into this fabrication. "I need you to halt this operation immediately," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. "This order is fraudulent, and I can prove it." While I called Jim Patterson in the Real County Safety Office, my trail cameras captured something even more valuable. Deborah's Mercedes parked 3 blocks away, perfectly positioned to watch the chaos she'd created. She was sitting there, watching her fake emergency order unfold in real time. Within an hour, the scene was swarming with county sheriffs, legitimate safety inspectors, and one very nervous demolition crew trying to figure out who had hired them to destroy private property using forged government paperwork. The crew chief was furious when he realized he'd been duped. "Lady paid cash," he told the sheriff. "Said all the permits were in order. We never would have taken this job if we'd known it was fake." By Saturday afternoon, I got the most interesting call of the entire ordeal. "Mr. Thornfield," said an unfamiliar voice, "this is Rebecca Martinez from the State Environmental Protection Agency. We've received reports of unauthorized development near protected wetlands. We'd like to schedule an inspection and review several concerning permit applications." Deborah's empire was about to collide with state and federal environmental law. The salamander habitat Dr. River had documented wasn't just a local curiosity, it was protected by real enforcement power. The trap was closing. Legal fraud, criminal conspiracy, environmental violations. Enough evidence to keep prosecutors busy for years. Sunday evening, I sat on my bridge watching the sunset turn Willow Creek gold and orange. Despite everything Deborah had done, the bridge still stood strong. Tomorrow's town hall meeting would be the final showdown, but I wasn't nervous anymore. Predators are most dangerous when cornered, but they're also most vulnerable when they can't see the traps closing around them. That calm vanished with a single phone call. Jim Patterson's voice came through sharp and urgent. "Marcus, get down to the bridge, now. She's not waiting for tomorrow." I grabbed my flashlight and sprinted through the humid night air. The scent of honeysuckle hung heavy, and when I reached the creek, my blood ran cold. A full demolition crew was working under portable floodlights, and there, directing them like a deranged field commander, was Deborah. "Stop right there," I shouted over the diesel engines. "This is private property." The excavator operator looked baffled. "Sir, we've got an emergency county order. Says the structure collapsed earlier today and poses an environmental hazard." Another forged order. This time, Deborah claimed the bridge had partially collapsed, threatening to contaminate the protected waterways. She'd scheduled the demolition for 4 a.m., just 2 hours before the town hall meeting where I planned to expose her crimes. "Ma'am," I called out. Deborah turned, standing beyond the work zone in a perfectly pressed business suit that looked absurd under floodlights. "This is trespassing and destruction of private property, Mr. Thornfield," she replied coolly. "Emergency environmental protection supersedes private ownership. The county has the authority to remove hazardous structures threatening protected ecosystems." Her plan was simple: destroy the evidence before I could present it. No bridge meant no preservation case. No structure meant no proof of her deliberate sabotage. She was literally erasing the crime scene. But she'd made one critical mistake. Weeks earlier, I'd reinforced the bridge with hidden steel supports, anticipating something like this. The excavator hit the first beam. Sparks flew. The operator froze. "What the hell? This wood's got steel inside it." "That's impossible," Deborah snapped. "It's a 100-year-old wooden bridge." He tried again, hitting another joint. More sparks, more confusion, and the growing realization that this emergency demolition was quickly turning into a public disaster. The floodlights had drawn half the neighborhood out of their homes. People were gathering along the creek, whispering, filming with their phones. Then came the cavalry. Jim Patterson had already called the sheriff and Channel 7 News. Their timing was perfect. The illegal demolition was now being broadcast live. "This is Lisa River reporting from Willowbrook subdivision," the reporter's voice carried across the water. "An apparent dispute over a historic bridge has escalated into a pre-dawn demolition attempt under questionable legal authority." The excavator operator climbed out of his cab, shaking his head. Lady, I don't know what's going on, but I'm not going to jail for destroying someone's property on live television. Deborah's composure finally cracked. You idiots, just tear it down. I'm paying you to tear it down. Sheriff's Deputy Rodriguez stepped forward, holding a warrant. Ma'am, we're here to examine the permits for this demolition. We're also investigating reports of forged county documents. As Deborah scrambled to explain herself, I pulled out my phone and played the trail camera footage. Stephen Walsh, caught red-handed sabotaging the bridge. The crowd gasped. HOA members stood frozen, realizing what they'd been part of. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced loud enough for the cameras to hear. What you're witnessing is the final act of a criminal conspiracy. Fraud, sabotage, and corruption designed to steal private property. Mrs. Patterson, the retired journalist, pushed forward with a folder of evidence. I've been investigating this story for weeks, she said. Ms. Kensington Price's development company has been planning this land grab for over 2 years, using HOA authority as cover for legalized theft. Deborah's lawyer arrived mid-chaos, still adjusting his tie. My client was acting on legitimate safety concerns, he said weakly. Your client, Deputy Rodriguez replied, just tried to destroy private property with forged documents on live television at 4 a.m. That's not public safety. That's criminal intent. As dawn broke over Willow Creek, Deborah Kensington Price was read her rights. Her 2-year scheme to steal my family's land had just collapsed, just like she'd wanted my bridge to. The town hall was still hours away, but the real climax had already unfolded, in front of cameras, neighbors, and the law. By 7 p.m., the Willowbrook Community Center was packed beyond capacity. Word of Deborah's arrest had spread across social media like wildfire. Reporters lined the walls and every seat was filled. The smell of Mrs. Patterson's emergency coffee service filled the air as people waited for answers. Interim HOA President Patricia Walsh opened the meeting, her voice trembling. Given this morning's events, we need to address serious questions about HOA authority, financial management, and the future of this community. Deborah sat in the front row, flanked by 2 attorneys. Her perfect posture couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. Before anyone else could speak, I stood up. I think everyone deserves to know what's really been happening here. I connected my laptop to the projector. The screen lit up with the 1919 water rights map, luxury condo blueprints, bank loan records using my land as collateral. And finally, the footage of Stephen Walsh sabotaging the bridge. Ladies and gentlemen, I began steadily, this is evidence of a criminal conspiracy. Ms. Kensington Price didn't move here to be a good neighbor. She came here to execute a plan, a 2-year scheme to seize waterfront property through fraud and manipulation. The room fell silent. Only the hum of TV cameras and a few gasps filled the air. County Attorney Michael Torres stepped forward. Mr. Thornfield's family owns the legal water rights to the entire Willow Creek system. Dating back to 1919, the HOA never had legal authority to charge fees for access or maintenance. A ripple of shock spread through the crowd. 15 years of fraudulent fees, inflated property values, and fake amenities, all exposed. And that's not all, Torres continued. We have evidence of forged documents, conspiracy to destroy private property, bribery, and environmental violations that could lead to federal prosecution. Deborah shot to her feet. This is absurd. I was protecting property values. That bridge is a hazard. Ms. Kensington Price, I replied calmly. Your company's own blueprints show luxury condos built on my property. You weren't protecting anything and you were cashing in. I held up the final piece of evidence. Bank records showing pre-construction loans using my land as collateral. You took out loans against property you didn't own. That's not community improvement. That's fraud. The room erupted in outrage. Patricia Walsh slammed the gavel, trying to calm the chaos. Then Rebecca Martinez from the EPA stood and dropped the final blow. Ms. Kensington, Price's development plans violate federal wetland protection laws. The proposed construction would have destroyed the natural habitat of endangered salamanders, a direct violation of the Endangered Species Act. Then Deputy Rodriguez stepped forward, holding up an arrest warrant. We also have charges related to this. Morning's attempted destruction of private property, using forged documents. The room fell completely silent as Deborah was handcuffed for the second time in just 12 hours. Her lawyers looked shell-shocked, already calculating how fast they could withdraw without violating ethics rules. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Jake Morrison stood from the audience holding a thick folder of documents. I move that this HOA board formally apologize to the Thornfield family, drop all bridge-related actions, and fully cooperate with law enforcement in investigating the financial irregularities in our accounts. Seconded, came voices from across the room. The vote was unanimous, except for Stephen Walsh, who was too busy whispering with his own attorney to participate. As the meeting ended, neighbors who once saw me as the villain lined up to shake my hand and apologize. The truth has a way of cutting through lies that spin and manipulation can never sustain. Outside, I stood beneath the stars beside my bridge, still standing strong. The news crews packed up their gear, and I breathed in the night air heavy with relief and quiet victory. Justice tastes even better when it's served with a side of community healing and hope for the future. 6 months later, I sat on that same bridge watching my grandson learn to fish, just as his great-great-grandfather once did from the same weathered oak railing. Morning mist rose from Willow Creek like it had for a century, but this time it carried the scent of restoration instead of diesel exhaust and corruption. Deborah Kensington Price now serves 18 months in federal prison for fraud, conspiracy, and environmental crimes. Her law license? Permanently revoked. Kensington Development, bankrupt paying restitution. Her brother-in-law lost his inspector job after the bribery investigation widened. Justice may move slow as molasses, but when it arrives, it's sweeter than revenge. The aftermath changed our neighborhood in ways I never expected. The HOA was dissolved and rebuilt with real transparency and community focus. Instead of bogus fines and land grabs, we now host creek cleanup days and historic preservation workshops. Patricia Walsh was elected president on a never-again platform that everyone rallied behind. My bridge was added to the National Register of Historic Places 3 months after the trial. The governor, the State Historical Society, and even a documentary crew attended the ceremony, a proof that one family's fight could inspire a movement. What began as a battle to save a single bridge became a symbol of how ordinary people can defeat institutional corruption through persistence, documentation, and unity. The ripple effects kept spreading like circles in calm water. I used Deborah's restitution funds to establish the Heritage Bridge Scholarship at State University's engineering school. The first recipient, Maria Santos, was a student whose family almost lost their home to fake HOA violations. She's now studying civil engineering with a focus on historic preservation, the kind of full-circle justice that restores your faith in balance. Our creek restoration project became a statewide model for environmental protection. Dr. Sarah Rivers. Salamander research now receives federal funding, and Willow Creek holds the largest protected amphibian population in the region. Ironically, Deborah's greed created one of the county's greatest conservation success stories, but the most meaningful change was personal. I found new purpose as a community advocate, helping families fight back against corrupt HOAs across the country. The legal precedent we set, protecting homeowners' rights against abusive covenant enforcement, is now cited in dozens of cases. Every week, my mailbox fills with thank you letters from people who used our strategies to stand up for themselves. Our bridge attracts heritage enthusiasts and engineering students from everywhere. We host an annual Bridge Day festival celebrating craftsmanship, history, and unity. Last year's festival raised enough money to create a preservation fund for other families defending their legacy properties. Linda jokes that retirement has made me busier than my military career ever did. But she's proud, and she's become our network's heart, leading HOA reform workshops and Know Your Deed classes that teach homeowners how to protect their rights. Our efforts even led to new state laws, stronger homeowner protections, mandatory environmental reviews before historic demolitions, and full financial transparency for HOAs. Governor Martinez signed the Thornfield Bridge Law last month, calling our case proof that individual courage can spark institutional change. Sarah and her husband bought a home just 2 blocks away, wanting their children to grow up knowing that standing up to bullies, even ones with legal power, is always worth it. Yesterday, I taught my 4-year-old granddaughter to skip stones from the same bridge where her ancestors once dreamed. built and loved. The scent of Linda's roses drifts on the breeze, mingling with creek water and the laughter of neighborhood kids. It's the safest, happiest place in the county, rebuilt on truth, trust, and community. And speaking of neighborhood drama, you should have seen what happened when Mrs. Patterson found out the city tried to condemn her award-winning garden for a parking expansion. Let's just say this community doesn't bow to corruption anymore. If you've got your own HOA nightmare, share it in the comments. I read every single one. Some stories deserve to be told where everyone can see the truth. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more real HOA stories, because we're just getting started exposing the corruption hiding in neighborhoods just like yours. Sometimes, the best way forward is remembering where you came from and protecting it for the generations who'll come after. From all of us here at HOA Stories, thank you for watching today's HOA Karen Meltdown. If you enjoyed seeing truth win and karma finally catch up, hit like, drop your thoughts below, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story.